There are moments in life when someone you deeply loved is suddenly no longer part of your journey. The silence they leave behind feels heavy, the memories echo in your mind, and your heart struggles to understand why things had to change. You question, you reflect, and sometimes you even blame yourself. But what if this wasn't a loss in the way you think? What if this was actually a form of protection? What if the one who sees what you cannot remove them for a reason beyond your understanding? Because the truth is, every deceiver has an expiry date, and when that time comes, no matter how strong the attachment, no matter how deep the emotions, Allah, in His infinite wisdom, will separate what was never meant to stay. Not every loss you experience in life is a punishment, even though it may feel that way in the moment. Sometimes, when something or someone is taken away from you, your first reaction is to question yourself. You begin to wonder what you did wrong, where you fell short, or why you were not enough for things to stay the way they were. The heart naturally leans towards self-blame because it is trying to make sense of the pain, trying to find a reason that feels tangible. But the reality is, not everything that leaves your life is a result of your failure. There are moments when Allah, in His infinite knowledge and mercy, removes something not because you are being punished, but because you are being protected in ways you cannot yet see. You may have been deeply attached to someone who seemed perfect for you, someone who made you feel secure and understood, yet beneath the surface there were things you were unaware of. There may have been intentions that were not pure, actions that would have eventually hurt you more, or paths that would have led you away from what is right for your soul. But because you could only see what was in front of you, you held on tightly, believing that this was good for you. And sometimes, when the heart becomes too attached to something that is not meant to remain, Allah intervenes and removes it, even if it causes temporary pain. That pain is not a sign of rejection from Allah. It is in fact a sign that He is looking after you, redirecting you, and saving you from something that could have caused you deeper harm in the long run. You might not understand it immediately because human vision is limited. You only see the present moment, the emotions you are feeling right now, and the emptiness that has been left behind. But Allah sees the entire picture, including the future consequences of what you are holding on to. There are situations where if that person had stayed in your life, your peace would have been slowly taken away, your values could have been compromised, or your connection with Allah might have weakened without you even realizing it. What feels like a beautiful attachment today could have turned into a source of regret tomorrow. And so, out of His mercy, Allah removes it early, before it reaches a point where the damage becomes much greater. It is important to understand that protection does not always come in the form of giving. Sometimes it comes in the form of taking away. And this is one of the most difficult realities to accept, because the human heart associates blessings with what it gains, not with what it loses. But there are losses that carry hidden blessings within them, blessings that only become clear with time, patience, and reflection. You might look back one day and realize that what you were crying over was actually something that would have broken you in ways you were not prepared for. You might come to see that the person you thought you needed was not meant for your journey, and that their absence allowed you to grow, to heal, and to become stronger in your faith and in yourself. What once felt like a painful ending may later reveal itself as a necessary turning point. In those moments of loss, when your heart feels heavy and your thoughts are filled with confusion, remind yourself that Allah is not careless with your life. Nothing is removed without purpose, and nothing is taken without wisdom. Even when you cannot trace the reason, you can trust that there is a reason. Even when it hurts, there is mercy hidden within that pain, shaping you, guiding you, and protecting you from what you cannot see. Yet deception in life does not remain hidden forever, even if it seems powerful in the beginning. A person may appear sincere, their words may sound convincing, and their presence may feel comforting, but anything built on falsehood carries within it the seeds of its own collapse. Truth has a way of rising, and falsehood, no matter how carefully it is hidden, always reaches a point where it can no longer sustain itself. This is not something that happens according to human timing, but according to divine timing, where every action, intention, and hidden reality is brought into the open when the appointed moment arrives. Many times, people become attached to others without realizing the full reality of who they are dealing with. The heart becomes involved, trust is given, and expectations begin to grow. In that state of emotional attachment, it becomes difficult to see beyond appearances. A person may ignore small signs, overlook inconsistencies, or even justify behavior that deep down feels wrong, simply because they want things to continue as they are. But deception cannot remain stable forever. It may delay exposure, but it cannot prevent it. There is a limit to how long falsehood can survive in the light of divine wisdom. Allah allows situations to continue for a period of time, not because He is unaware, but because He is giving space for clarity to emerge in its proper time. What is hidden in the hearts of people, their true intentions, their silent motives, and their private actions are all known completely. Nothing is concealed from the one who sees beyond what eyes can perceive. And when the moment of exposure comes, it is often in a way that leaves no doubt, no confusion, and no room for further illusion. At that point, what was once emotionally difficult to accept becomes unmistakably clear. The same person who once appeared trustworthy may suddenly reveal behavior that exposes their reality. Words that once brought comfort may now be seen as empty or misleading. Situations that were once justified begin to make sense in a completely different way. And the heart, although hurt, begins to awaken to the truth that was always present but not fully recognized. This process is not random. It is not chaos. It is a form of divine alignment where illusions are removed so that reality can be seen. Sometimes people only understand the value of truth after experiencing the collapse of deception. And although the moment of realization can be painful, it carries within it a form of liberation, because being freed from falsehood is better than remaining in comfort built on lies. There are times when Allah allows a person to remain in your life for a period, not because they are meant to stay forever, but because certain lessons, awareness, and emotional maturity need to develop within you. Through that experience, you begin to learn how to distinguish between sincerity and pretense, between stability and illusion, between genuine care and hidden self-interest. These lessons do not come through explanation alone, but through lived experience, often through emotional involvement that later reveals its deeper meaning. And when deception finally reaches its end, it is not simply the removal of a person, but the removal of a veil that was covering your understanding. What remains after that is clarity, even if it arrives through pain. The heart begins to see more clearly, the mind begins to understand more deeply, and the soul begins to recognize that nothing remains hidden forever. In a world governed by divine awareness, attachment is one of the strongest emotions placed within the human heart, and it is also one of the most tested. A person naturally becomes attached to those who show kindness, who offer companionship, who make life feel lighter and more meaningful. There is nothing wrong with loving people, nothing wrong with valuing relationships, and nothing wrong with feeling emotionally connected. However, the problem begins when that attachment slowly shifts from love into dependence, and from dependence into a quiet form of reliance, where the heart begins to believe that its peace, stability, and happiness exist in the hands of another human being. When this happens, the balance is lost. Instead of trusting Allah as the ultimate source of all comfort and direction, the heart begins to lean heavily on people. It starts to feel that without a certain individual, life will not be complete, or that without their presence, peace cannot exist. This subtle shift often goes unnoticed because it develops gradually. It begins with emotional closeness, then trust, then expectation, and finally dependence. And once the heart becomes dependent on someone who is not permanent, pain becomes inevitable. People are not thabit. They change, they leave, they disappoint, and sometimes they reveal realities that were hidden in the beginning. When the heart has placed its sense of stability in something that was never meant to be permanent, the moment of separation feels like collapse. But in reality, what has collapsed is not life itself, but an attachment that was misplaced. The emotional reaction is intense because the expectation was high, but the foundation was fragile from the beginning. Trust in Allah, on the other hand, is not dependent on presence or absence of people. It is rooted in certainty that whatever He chooses is always care, even if it arrives in a form that is difficult to accept. When a person's reliance is placed correctly, the heart becomes stable even when circumstances change. But when reliance is placed on individuals, every change becomes a source of anxiety, fear, and emotional instability. There are moments in life when Allah allows a person to experience the breaking of that attachment so that they can recognize where their true dependence should have been. It is not always immediate, and it is not always gentle. Sometimes the removal of someone deeply loved creates a void that forces reflection. In that emptiness, the heart is given an opportunity to turn back, to realign, and to rediscover a connection that is not dependent on human presence. This is where true understanding begins to develop. A person starts to realize that while relationships are part of life, they are not the foundation of life. They are means, not sources. They are temporary, not eternal. And when they are treated as ultimate sources of peace, they inevitably become sources of pain because they cannot carry a weight they were never designed to hold. Even the most sincere people are limited in their ability to fulfill emotional needs completely. They have their own struggles, their own limitations, and their own paths to walk. Expecting them to be the source of complete emotional fulfillment places an impossible burden on them and an unhealthy dependency on the heart. This is why moments of separation, though painful, often serve as a correction of direction, bringing the heart back to a more balanced understanding of where peace truly originates. Over time, a person begins to see that the stability they were searching for in others was never meant to be found there in the first place. It was always meant to be anchored in something greater, something unchanging, something not affected by departure or distance. And through this realization, the heart slowly learns to release its grip on dependency, not because love disappears, but because understanding deepens and reliance is restructured in a way that brings more inner stability than emotional uncertainty. The wisdom behind separation is often not understood in the moment it happens, because the human heart naturally evaluates events based on immediate emotions rather than long-term outcomes. When someone important is removed from a person's life, the first reaction is usually pain, confusion, and resistance. The mind keeps searching for reasons that make sense according to what is visible, while the heart struggles to accept a reality it did not choose. But what is not immediately understood is that separation is not always a sign of loss in the ultimate sense. It can be a form of redirection that carries protection, refinement, and unseen mercy within it. There are situations where a person is deeply connected to someone who on the surface appears beneficial, comforting, or even essential. The relationship may have moments of happiness, emotional attachment, and shared understanding, yet beneath those visible layers, there may exist elements that are not aligned with long-term well-being. These elements may not be obvious at first. They may be subtle influences on character, gradual shifts in priorities, or quiet compromises in values. Because these changes do not appear suddenly, the person remains unaware of the direction in which things are slowly moving. When separation eventually occurs, it often feels abrupt to the one experiencing it. The heart does not immediately recognize the underlying wisdom because it is still attached to what was emotionally familiar. But from a broader perspective, that separation may have prevented outcomes that were not visible at the time. It may have stopped a slow decline that would have been much harder to reverse later. It may have removed a path that seemed attractive but was not aligned with long-term spiritual or emotional stability. Human understanding is limited to the present moment, while divine wisdom encompasses both the present and what lies ahead. What feels like a disruption in personal plans may actually be a protection from outcomes that were never meant to unfold. The delay in understanding this reality is not because there is no wisdom, but because the human perspective requires time and experience to recognize patterns that were not initially visible. Sometimes, a person remains attached to what is familiar even when it is not beneficial, simply because familiarity creates a sense of comfort. The mind associates known experiences with safety, even if those experiences are not healthy in the long run. This is why separation can feel so difficult. It is not only the loss of a person, but the loss of emotional familiarity, routine, and expectation. Yet within that discomfort lies the beginning of clarity, because when familiarity is removed, truth is no longer overshadowed by emotional attachment. In many cases, separation forces reflection. It creates space where the noise of attachment is reduced, allowing deeper awareness to emerge. In that silence, a person begins to notice what was previously ignored, what was tolerated, or what was misunderstood. Over time, patterns become clearer, intentions become easier to recognize, and emotional clarity begins to replace confusion. There are also moments where separation is not about the other person alone, but about the internal state of the one experiencing it. It becomes a means of realignment, where the heart is gently redirected away from excessive attachment and toward a more balanced way of living. Through this process, emotional dependence is reduced, resilience is strengthened, and inner awareness begins to develop in ways that would not have been possible while remaining attached. What initially feels like an ending often contains within it the beginning of a different kind of understanding. Not everything that departs does so without purpose, and not every distance is a sign of loss in its final meaning. Sometimes it is through separation that clarity is born, through absence that awareness grows, and through discomfort that a deeper sense of direction quietly emerges. Emotional pain is one of the most powerful experiences a human being goes through, and it often becomes the very doorway through which spiritual growth begins, even though it is rarely recognized in the moment. When the heart is hurt, it naturally turns inward, questioning everything it once believed to be stable and secure. There is a sense of emptiness, a feeling of being shaken from within, and a quiet struggle to understand why something so meaningful could be taken away or allowed to change so drastically. Yet within this emotional turbulence lies an opportunity that is not immediately visible, an opportunity to grow in awareness, patience, and closeness to the Creator in a way that comfort alone could never have produced. When life is smooth and relationships are intact, the human heart often becomes distracted. It finds comfort in people, in routines, in expectations, and slowly begins to lean on creation more than it realizes. In that state, awareness of dependence on Allah becomes weaker, not because belief is absent, but because emotional satisfaction creates a false sense of sufficiency. A person may still pray, still believe, still express faith, but the depth of reliance is not fully tested. It is during emotional breaking points that the reality of dependence becomes clearer, because everything external that once provided comfort begins to feel distant or unstable. Pain strips away illusions. It removes the layers of emotional distraction and forces the heart into a state of reflection. In that state, a person begins to recognize how much they were attached to things that were never permanent. The loss or separation of someone deeply loved creates a void that cannot easily be filled by worldly means. And in that void, something important begins to happen internally. The heart, once occupied with attachment, begins to search for stability beyond what has been taken away. This search often leads to a deeper form of communication with Allah. In moments of emotional distress, the sincerity of supplication becomes different. It is no longer routine or habitual. It becomes heartfelt, desperate, and genuine. A person who may have been distant in moments of ease finds themselves turning more frequently, more sincerely, and more vulnerably toward the one who never leaves. This shift is not forced. It emerges naturally from the realization that human support has limits, while divine support does not. Through this process, patience is not just practiced, it is developed. It begins as endurance of pain, but gradually transforms into understanding. The heart starts to see that every emotional struggle carries within it a form of refinement. Just as physical pain teaches the body to heal and adapt, emotional pain teaches the soul to reflect, to recalibrate, and to detach from unhealthy forms of dependence. It reshapes expectations, softens arrogance, and reduces emotional over-attachment to temporary things. There is also a quiet transformation that takes place in perspective. What once felt like a devastating loss begins to be seen differently over time. The intensity of pain slowly gives way to reflection, and reflection gradually opens the door to insight. A person begins to understand that not every connection was meant to last, not every attachment was meant to be permanent, and not every separation was without purpose. This understanding does not erase the pain entirely, but it changes the way the pain is carried. Emotional hardship also develops resilience. A heart that has been through loss becomes less dependent on external validation and more grounded in internal stability. It becomes more cautious with attachment, more thoughtful in trust, and more aware of where true peace should be sought. This is not emotional coldness, but emotional maturity, where the heart learns to love without losing balance and to care without complete dependency. Over time, what began as heartbreak transforms into a form of awakening. The same experience that once brought tears begins to bring insight. The same situation that once caused confusion begins to bring clarity. And in that transformation, the heart moves from being dependent on what was lost to becoming more anchored in what cannot be lost, developing a deeper awareness that emotional pain, when processed with patience and reflection, becomes a silent teacher guiding the soul toward a stronger and more conscious form of connection with its creator. In the end, what the heart often perceives as loss is not always loss in its true meaning. When someone you loved is removed from your life, it feels final, it feels painful, and it feels like something important has been taken away without explanation. But time, reflection, and faith slowly reveal that not every departure is random, and not every separation is without wisdom. There are moments when Allah removes people not to break you, but to protect you, to redirect you, and to save you from paths that you were emotionally unable to see clearly at the time. Deception does not last forever. Attachment is not meant to replace reliance on Allah, and separation is not always a sign of punishment. Instead, these experiences become part of a larger journey where the heart is being shaped, refined, and guided toward what is better and more lasting. What once felt like confusion gradually turns into understanding, and what once felt like pain slowly transforms into awareness. The human heart learns through experience that people are temporary, circumstances change, and only Allah remains constant through every stage of life. When a deceiver is removed, when a connection ends, or when something deeply valued is taken away, it is not the end of your story. It is often the beginning of a more sincere relationship with your Creator, a deeper sense of self-awareness, and a stronger form of emotional and spiritual balance. In that realization, the heart begins to rest, not because everything it desired was granted, but because it finally understands that what was taken was never meant to stay, and what remains with Allah is always better than what was lost in the world.